A hearty good morning to all. From our English Reader course book, I'll explain a lesson for you today. So turn page number 54. In a page number 54, we have lesson 4, the Carew Murder Case. In a lesson 4, we have some male characters and some female characters. Let's start from the male characters. First, Mr. Hyde, whose full name is Edward Hyde. Second, Mr. Utterson, who is a lawyer. Third, Sir Danvers Carew, who is an old handsome gentleman. Fourth, Henry Jekyll, who is a doctor. Fifth, Newcomen, who is an inspector, means a police officer. Now let's proceed towards the female characters. Number 1, a maid servant, who is a teenager. Number 2, an old lady. So let's start the lesson. A maid servant whose house was by the bank of the river returned back to her house after serving her master. It was about 11 o'clock night. The sky was clear and full moon had a silver shining. When she went upstairs in her room overlooking the window, she got a sight of an old handsome gentleman who was just reaching the corner of the lane. From the other side, another gentleman appeared who was short in height. He was a man with a hat and a cane. The maid servant was surprised to recognize that the man in hat and cane was Mr. Hyde. While the old gentleman was speaking politely, Mr. Hyde was fiddling the cane like a madman. Then, all of a sudden, Mr. Hyde stamped his feet, brandished the cane in an anger, and banged the old gentleman. He clubbed him to the earth. He jumped on the victim's body like an ape and continued a storm of blows till the bones shattered. Mr. Hyde murdered the old gentleman. Seeing the horrible scene and hearing the sound of shattered bones, the maid fainted. After 3 hours, the maid came to her senses and called for the police. The police arrived and started inquiring. They found a broken stick rolling in the neighboring gutter. A purse and a gold watch was found upon the victim's body. A sealed and stamped envelope on which the name and address were mentioned of Mr. Utterson was also found. The envelope was brought to Mr. Utterson, who was a lawyer. He was told to visit the police station. He dressed himself, took breakfast, and hurried for the police station. When he reached the police station, the dead body was shown to him. He recognized the body and said that the body was of Sir Danvers Carew. The matter was explained to him and the broken stick was shown too. He at once recognized the stick because the same stick had been presented by him to Henry Jekyll many years before. To get sure, he inquired whether Mr. Hyde was a person of small stature or not. He was told, according to the maidservant's evidence, Mr. Hyde was a man of small stature. The lawyer wanted to keep the secret a secret. He knew everything about Mr. Hyde. How? Let me tell you. Henry Jekyll and Mr. Utterson were friends since childhood. Later on, according to their profession, Mr. Utterson became a lawyer and Henry Jekyll became a doctor. As a friend, Mr. Utterson had presented a stick to Henry Jekyll, of which it is described in the lesson. Henry Jekyll used to do some experiments with the medicines. He had created a potion, means a dose of medicine. If you'll take that, you would be completely changed. Henry Jekyll was a good man, but he took a dose of medicine and became Edward Hyde, who was a wicked, cruel and an evil man. Now, when he was evil, he don't want to change himself, and in that wickedness, he haunted people in his own unique style. This was the secret. Like this, Mr. Edward Hyde and Henry Jekyll is a different name for the same person. So, once again, welcome back to the lesson. It was clear for Mr. Utterson that the murderer is no one else, but he was his friend Mr. Hyde. He knew his dwelling and requested the police officer to come with him in his cab so that they could visit Mr. Hyde in his residence. After an hour or two, they reached a house and knocked the door. An evil-faced old lady appeared. Her face was evil, but her manners were excellent. She was asked whether the house belonged to Mr. Hyde or not. The lady replied, "Yes, they have arrived at the right house." "Is Mr. Hyde now here?" the lady was questioned. She told that she had seen him till yesterday. "Very well then, we wish to see his rooms," said Mr. Utterson. The lady declared that it was impossible. Mr. Utterson explained to the lady that the man beside him was Inspector Newcomen of Scotland on duty. Now the lady allowed them to enter the house. Mr. Hyde used a couple of rooms. First room was furnished with expensive taste, but the second room was completely opposite of it. Everything was scattered. It seemed that something might have been lost and was searched hurriedly. Newcomen went near the hearth. He saw some papers were burned there, and in the grey ashes some parts of checkbook was found. The other half of the stick was found behind the door. It was the best proof for him. he thanked Mr. Utterson and declared that now Mr. Hyde was in his hand. He said that Mr. Hyde might have lost his head, or he would never had left the stick or burned the checkbook. He'll need some money to live. He's out of pocket now. We have to wait for him at the bank and get out the wanted posters. But it was not easy to get the photo of Mr. Hyde. Few people had seen him once or twice. He had never been photographed. The remarkable thing to be noted was his own unique style of haunting people. So the officer decided to have a notice printed on which his action of murder would be written, and it would become the wanted poster. Our lesson is over. Till then, keep on learning. Take care. Thank you.